Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and all my days and thems out there. I'm trying to do better about saying everybody else in between. Kind of sets up a weird concept of a spectrum, but you know, whatever. Do you? Mass support to all of you as long as you're not out there hating. You know what I mean? This is the Broke Boy Sports Podcast, and week 3 technically has officially started, but I don't give a shit. I'm going to talk about week 2 of the NFL season. I've watched every single snap of every single game. This is usually the worst part of the NFL season for me personally, because it's a combination of getting used to watching that much football. Like the last 2 Sundays, I've been struggling to stay awake for the entirety of the NFL season because of the stuff I've done on Saturday, which is typically like athletic stuff or whatever. So as some of you guys who are weekend warriors out there will know, it takes a lot of energy to be able to pull that kind of shit off, especially on a regular basis. So I've been working on that, been doing a whole bunch of other stuff, and that is not the correct scene to click on this one. But yeah, been working on that, doing my thing. It's week 3. I got to get my conditioning up. You know what I mean? Like I didn't really pay too much attention to the preseason because, it took a lot of time. And when the league starts taking the preseason more seriously, then I will as well. Sometimes I wonder if the preseason gains value from the rule changes that are being implemented like every other year. Anyway, I'm Ashton Lewis. We're going to talk about every single game in week 2 of the NFL season. Yes, last season we did a bunch of different categories before we got to the game breakdowns, but this week is a little bit special. I don't have time to do that, so we're not going to go through it. If you want to know what the nuke of fantasy football was, which if you remember from last season, the nuke is the player that if they were in your lineup, you essentially got nuked out of being able to win your game. Unfortunately, this week's nuke player was Alvin Kamara with 4 touchdowns and over 100 yards rushing, and other hand up that's on camera, I lost with Alvin Kamara in my lineup because I have a fantasy team that auto-drafted, and some of the players that auto-drafted were off pure speculation about where they were in the depth chart, as opposed to it's I have a series of teams, and right now, usually we have this thing where I talk about how I'm doing win and loss wise. Anyway, basically what happens is I formulate opinions based off what happened last season, some adjustments based off free agency, and then information that I gathered throughout the course of the season, just like every other human being does, about the NFL. And then I choose a pool of players that I'm okay with having on my team, right? And usually there's a good chunk of them that are like absolute duds. So it kind of screws me over in the sense of in each one of my leagues, there's a group of players that I do have, right? Most of them are actually going to be pretty good. Some of them are going to be lead weight on that team. One, for instance, is Mike Williams this year. I thought Mike Williams was going to have a much bigger role than he has had so far in the Jets offense. So I've been slowly, as I call it, divesting myself from the Jets stock because look, it looks like they're trying to get to cruising altitude still. A little bit action that happened tonight in Thursday Night Football. I haven't watched the entirety of the game, but it looks like the Jets went out there and they did their thing finally. They pieced it together. We'll talk about how they did versus the Titans and why it was important what they did and how they did it. So, if you don't remember, I'll refresh your memory from last season, or if you're brand new to the show, specifically the NFL recap show, the way I break down the games is into 4 different categories. I think we only did 3 today. I think I only did 4. No, I did 4. The 4 different categories being snooze fest, which means this is the most boring game, or some of the most boring games of the entire season, or some of the most boring games of the entire week, not the entire season. I would love to do a top 10 most boring games of the season, because I did top 10 most exciting games of the year last year. But snooze fest, they're the worst games. They were not fun to watch. There wasn't very much cool stuff that happened, and typically these games are going to be the ones where the really good teams go up against the really bad teams, even though sometimes when the good teams go up against the bad teams like shit themselves so hard that it's hilarious, or the bad team gets to a point where they fall into the heartbreaker category, where they have been so close to winning some of these games and they just can't get over the hump, and now it's to the point where they're not going to get over the hump, and you have to come to the realization they're going to be the team this year, or the group of teams this year, that is just constantly losing by 1 possession or 10 points. You know what I mean? That's always tough. But especially when it's your team. Luckily for me, both of my teams are 2-0 currently right now. Houston Texans and Seattle Seahawks fan here so far. Like I mentioned before in the preseason, I'm not adopting the Commanders just because Bobby's on the team. And I will say this, I've watched every single snap of the Commanders game. They have progressively gotten a little bit better. If you are out there watching or whatever, you got questions, you got comments, you got hot takes from week 2 of the NFL season, I'm more than happy to react to them throughout the course of the show. But we got 4 categories. We got Snooze Fest, we got the Heartbreaker category, which are the games that obviously are the ones where if you're a fan, they literally just ripped your heart out and peed on it. The Oh My category, where the result was a little interesting and more than likely the path to the result was more interesting. And then the games that we're here for. This is what we're here for is the final category. It's the games of the week that are why we, as fans of football, enjoy the NFL. And then these are the type of games that if a random person watched it, it would make them into a fan of the NFL. So there's not very many games that fall into that category every single week, but I can safely say there's at least one that does almost every single week. Now, let's talk about it from the top. We, of course, start with the worst of the worst. If you're unfamiliar with the way the show usually goes when it's just a regular Broke Boy Sports podcast, you start with the bad and you go to the good. Snooze Fest in this one, I took notes on every single game because one thing, and I get it, man, the content machine is constantly rolling. Everybody's got something that they've got to turn in. Everybody's got to, do a quick turnaround from Sunday to Monday, have stuff to talk about. I don't get paid to do this, and I want to do a good job. I don't have some magical system for being able to understand what happened in each and every single game to have a nuanced take on it. And I'm not responsible for being on Get Up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I don't have to be on First Take. I don't have to be on whatever Nick Wright's show is. By the way, I have a friend, and you can hit me up in the comments. I have a friend who watches FS1, and I don't understand why. Because, obviously Skip Bayless getting fired right before the NFL season is like massive for FS1 in terms of, one, money. I don't know how much money they owe him. He obviously gets paid a good chunk of the money that he obviously is still getting paid. I think this is, so right now, is a contract year for Stephen A. Smith. And I wonder how much that will affect Skip Bayless. There probably is going to be a move for FS1 to try and get Stephen A. Smith. I'm not an executive. I don't know if it's worth selling the soul of my entire network to get Stephen A. Smith on air. He's one of the most popular sports personalities ever. Probably the most popular. And I know there's a good chunk of, and I can only, if you're a person who's trying to deny that Stephen A. Smith has risen to a place where he is not synonymous with sports talk, you're insane. Or more than likely, you have some kind of racial bias. Because there's a lot of people who like talk about Mad Dog and stuff like that. I'm like, those guys were popping in their time. They were legends in their time. Stephen A. Smith has been doing this. He literally built an entire network on his back, right? Him and Skip Bayless built a network and created essentially the content machine that we have going on right now, to the point where we don't he is responsible for the 24-hour news cycle in sports. And also the idea that many people just refuse to adopt is that more of sports media is about entertainment value than actually being correct on most of the stuff that you say. But luckily for Stephen A. Smith, he's a pretty smart sports guy. Not going to say that he should be talking about every single sport, but the fact of the matter is, you see him on screen, a lot of people want to know what he has to say, just like Howard Stern, right? Everybody always talks about like how many people hate watch Howard Stern for a multitude of reasons, right? He's done some messed up stuff in his radio career, but to say that he's not iconic would be disingenuous. Anyway, let's talk about football from the top here. Snooze Fest. I'm actually not even going to open my notes because this is important for me personally to work on being able to get through these bad games. The Saints and the Cowboys. The Saints played the Saints showed up to play a football game, and the Cowboys were also there. Basically, you can't see the score if you're not looking at the screen. The Saints won 44-19. Vast majority of those 19 points from the Cowboys came in the back half of this game, where they still were struggling to get up and down the field. They had one good play the entirety of it. They had two good plays. One was an interception that they got off Derek Carr, which, by the way, they immediately gave back one play later. So, yeah, it was the ever rare, back-to-back interception situation. The other big play was CeeDee Lamb breaking a tackle for, I want to say it was like a 60-yard touchdown run or something like that, which is not surprising because it's CeeDee Lamb. H-Town hold it down. But, yeah, the Cowboys got absolutely dismantled and smoked in this one, which, Cowboys fans, it's the end of the world for them. But the fact of the matter is, it's week 2 of the season, and this game... This win means a lot more for the Saints in the long run because the Saints look like they're the front runner in the NFC South as of right now. If you're familiar with the NFC South historically, it is one of the most chaotic divisions in the history of the National Football League, in the sense of, I think it was like a decade straight where the winner of the division rarely ever made it back to the winner of the division made the playoff spot, took the playoff spot, and then the following year there was a different winner of the division, or the division winner the following year was in last place, which is crazy for like a decade. So you went from like worst to first for like 10 straight years. And there was a good chunk of time the winner of the NFC South actually ended up in the NFC Championship game. If you go back and look at it, I think. Because all those years with the Saints. And then, of course, the Carolina Panthers had their run as well. The Atlanta Falcons had that Super Bowl run. And who's the last? Anyway, Saints Cowboys. The fact of the matter is, man, this was an indictment on the Cowboys defense up front. Yeah, the Saints put up 44 points, and a lot of it... Look, man, I remember one note that I wrote down for this game, and I feel like it tells you everything you need to know. You want to know how bad the Cowboys' run defense was? Come here real quick. Derek Carr, quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, completed 11 passes. In the year 2024 of our Lord, and his team put up 44 points because turns out sealing the edge is like impossible for the Cowboys. Yeah, just how it is, man. They got dismantled. They got bodied up front. There was a good chunk of teams that got bodied up front, which is so interesting to see because we talked about in the preseason that I think running is back. Running the football is very much back. Dennis Allen finally smartened up. Like so many coaches I've seen so far this season, and most importantly, so many of these quarterbacks who they're getting smart. Their backup plan A and plan B are like get the ball in the best player's hands. And Clint Kubiak is going to get so much love this season, which is really funny because if you're a Houston Texans fan, you know how it should tell you everything you need to know about the stupidity of Texans fans for how vicious we were towards Gary Kubiak. Because essentially what Clint Kubiak does is what Gary Kubiak did with the Texans when they were in, he's a second coach ever in the history of the Houston Texans, and they were able to win a bunch of different games or whatever. And you can talk about the quarterback situation not being ideal because that was true. Gary Kubiak went on to win the Super Bowl after that. I don't know if you know who was the offensive coordinator when Matt Schaub was like the number one quarterback in the NFL for a little while there. When the Texans had the number one offense, it was some guy named, let me check my notes, Kyle Shanahan. Remember him? Yeah, he's pretty good. He's pretty good at his job. But anyway, that tells you everything you need to know about Texans fans. Saints, Cowboys, and I really don't have too much else to say about this game, man, other than, like, if you go back and you watch this, they are the poster boy for, one round of applause for the Saints for understanding that the Cowboys still have not fixed the issue that they had the entirety of last season, and that is, oh, man, turns out you can beat the Cowboys if you just run away from Micah Parsons. You know, that's what the Eagles did a good chunk of the time when they were able to go out there and be successful versus the Cowboys. And I have to imagine the Eagles going to do the exact same thing because the game plan's out, right? Like the game plan is out. The Saints put like a blueprint. It's not even the blueprint, man. They put the framing up for the next like 7 teams to come into town. It just comes down to are the Cowboys willing to go out there and change the way that they defend the run and make their DBs, who, if we are led to believe what we knew from last year, like Deron Bland and Trayvon Diggs, they are the guys that we think they are. You're going to have to let them run free a little bit more. Because I'll say this much. There was a good chunk of explosive plays in this game. There was one play from Rashid Shaheed, who, continues to emerge, which is crazy to think about, with Chris Olave on your team. Chris Olave, obviously one of those guys that doesn't make a ton of plays deep down the field. He's more of a short yardage explosive type play guy. Tell me if you've heard that trope before. The Ohio State quarterback is a quote unquote possession receiver that's really good at breaking plays from short distances. Yeah, exactly, right? It's almost like Brian Hartline has a type or something like that. Anyway, Brian Hartline being the wide receivers coach for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Anyway, but yeah, this overall in this one, embarrassing performance from the Cowboys up front in terms of the defensive line. It didn't even matter how good the corners were able to cover. They couldn't get any pressure on Derek Carr. He went like 11 for 18, I think, in the totality of this game, and it showed on the scoreboard. The time of possession was like split down the middle, which is wild to think about because there was a good chunk of time where you were watching Dak Prescott throw the ball around, and it didn't seem like bad things were happening. But then they would get in the red zone, and like a lot of other teams that we've seen early on in the season, the red zone's just like, oh, well, can't score from here. Oh, well. And so a lot of these big play teams, or a lot of teams are having to hit home runs to be able to come up with points because the more space the defense has to cover, the harder it is for them to drop back into their zones and be able to cover every spot that they need to cover. But if you're like 10 yards and in, they can just drop 8 and rush the rest, or drop 7 and rush the rest, and see if they can come up with it because there's no spot for you to recognize that your wide receiver is going to be open in this zone for half a second, right? Because they're all just watching the eyes of the quarterback. And that's like the go-to method for a lot of teams this season. We're 2 weeks in, and defenses are once again like leagues and miles ahead of offenses. So we'll see what happens as time goes on because it's not boding well for being a high-scoring season, even though the final score in this game was 44-19. It feels like we're back in the 90s again, boys. Anyway, Colts-Packers. This game was deceptive in a lot of different ways. For instance, this game, according to the score, was 16. The final score was 16-10. This game was not close until the end of the fourth quarter. So the Packers essentially had to. So if you didn't know, the story going into it, Jordan Love he injured his MCL. Allegedly, he's playing Sunday. We'll see. I've never heard of like a 1-week MCL sprain. Probably gonna figure it out or whatever. Hopefully they're not risking him for the entirety of the season for the sake of 1 week 3 regular season game. But who knows, man. The Packers come out here. They had a clear game plan. They had to get Malik Willis. They trade for him from the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans, Malik Willis was a draft pick that was expected to come out there and give similar performances to Lamar Jackson because of what he was able to do at Liberty, a place that I vehemently hate. For a multitude of reasons. If you don't know Liberty's backstory, go look it up. Don't know how a guy like Malik Willis ended up at Liberty, but he was able to not only end up at Liberty, put up a ton of numbers, be really successful as a quarterback there, but then also go through the draft process, and people didn't really see what the issue was with him as a player. A lot of hesitation in this game at the NFL level, and then most importantly, seems like he's a little late on reading when to run, but with Matt LaFleur, in like less than a week, they were able to come up with a game plan that was highly successful for Malik Willis. Not only was the game plan hand the ball to Josh Jacobs, which is, hey, look, that's a highly successful game plan for your boy. You know what I mean? I can go out there and do that. Josh Jacobs dominated this game. It was insane how good that guy is. If you are... I don't know how you feel about it. Raiders obviously looking really good this season so far, but to sit back and be like, we could have still had Josh Jacobs if they just paid him some money. But now he's on a team that is, from what I can tell, better than the Raiders as of right now. And he's going out there, he's being a big, impactful player. So basically they rode Josh Jacobs, and Malik Willis was able to, one, feed off the hesitation that came from play action to Josh Jacobs on the defense for the Colts. By the way, think the Colts' time as an elite defense is dead. Don't. It's 2 weeks into the season. Zaire Franklin has not looked good in a multitude of games. And I'm not like a football genius or a football savant or anything like that. I was a really shitty Division I college football player. All I know is I watched Zaire Franklin because he went off last season. EJ Speed, really good football player. Every time they're running the ball, both of those guys have offensive linemen standing over them as the running backs are like 4 yards down the field. So I don't need a PhD in football to know that if both of your linebackers are either being mauled by dudes 120 pounds heavier or you're picking turf out of your helmet, it's bad for the run defense. And you saw the struggles throughout the course of this game. This one also came down to a ton of field goals because, just like so many other teams in the NFL, when you get into the red zone, they just drop back in the zone. And Malik Willis is not yet, as far as we know, the caliber of quarterback who can hit those windows in enough time without turning the ball over. Eric Wilson was kind of the key player defensively for me. It didn't feel like he played a ton of snaps throughout the course of the game, but he was a major impact on not only the run defense for the Packers defense versus the Colts, but also did a great job of like generating turnovers because he's been in the league for like 7 years or something like that, and he got his first interception in this game. He had a play on 4th and 1 that would have been a 4th and 1 play on what could have been the game-winning drive. Luckily, the Colts were able to work their way into one more drive after this happened. But the Colts, by the way, number one way to get fired in the NFL is to be the guy who thinks he's smarter than playing the best player for a position. So 4th and 1, late in the fourth quarter, the Colts are fighting to get back into the field. They're fighting to get into the red zone, score a touchdown, get a field goal, something on the scoreboard, right? Because you can tell, like, the final score is 16-10. This game ended with the ball in the Colts' hands. That's all it came down to. It came down to, like, could the Colts put together one drive to go out here and win this game? They could not, as you can tell by the final score. But this is the drive before the final drive. It's 4th and 1, clock's ticking. They're running option fucking read with Anthony Richardson and Trey Sermon, former Ohio State running back. Some of you familiar with. He had like a crazy college football playoff semifinal game, and it was able to elevate him to the point where it helped out his draft stock significantly. He was able to go to the 49ers, but he never really like got a chance to play or anything like that. And now he's worked his way to the Colts. And he's a pretty good running back. I just know, and I think everybody else can agree, the Colts do have the third best running back in the NFL. And the 3 plays before this play, he was not on the field either. They actually got so concerned on the broadcast that they asked Pam Oliver to go find out if Jonathan Taylor was hurt. And he was not. He was not. But it was 4th and 1. The game was on the line. And they chose not to put Jonathan Taylor into the game. Probably, the number 1 player on this team? Number 1, number 2, depends on the day. I would definitely say Jonathan Taylor's better than Anthony Richardson right now, mainly because every form of successful offense that the Colts had throughout the course of this game came from Jonathan Taylor. So unless something drastically changed and we just don't know what the hell's going on, or maybe the Colts are trying to play the money game where they're trying to find a way to get rid of Jonathan Taylor by trying to find out if some of these other running backs can come up with some big plays in key situations, which would be hilarious because if there's anything worse that could hinder you from being successful as a potential winning team is to be focused on money when the game is on the line. Anyway, while you're losing to a backup quarterback and your offense is getting shut down, whatever. They run the option read. Eric Wilson gets into the backfield. He's like 3 yards deep. Anthony Richardson doesn't do a good job of selling that he's going to keep the ball. Eric Wilson does not fall for it. Jumps over, smashes Trey Sermon down to the ground. They lose 2 yards as a turnover on downs. The Colts defense stands up because they are able to finally stop the run because they know that the run is coming, right? A good chunk of these offensive drives that were successful from the Packers were because they had just enough passing ability from Malik Willis. Some of these throws that he made down the sideline, narrow windows. A lot of these throws, swing routes, curl routes, a lot of them drag routes in certain situations, and the wide receivers for the Packers really stepped up in key situations. Man, they needed, or Malik Willis needed them to be successful, and they stood up for him, man. And it's really good to see that the Packers are capable of doing that, because you need what it really comes down to is there are teams that can force teams to play their way and get themselves into a situation, force their opponent to play their way and get themselves into a situation where they win. There are other teams that have variable ways to win football games. Like when certain things are going a certain way, they're able to run the ball and take time off the clock. They're able to pass the ball all over the field. They're able to make short yardage. They're able to take a bunch of short yardage plays and compile that into a drive. Whereas there are some offenses that are only capable of functioning with the kind of personnel that they have versus the personnel that's normal in the NFL. They're only able to function in like 2 different ways. And that, I think, is indicative of the winners and the losers in the NFL. The Packers showed that they have a lot of versatility in their offense. They played a completely different style of football this entire game and were able to come out with a win against a team that I still think can make it to the playoffs. Because I believe they just lost the first 2 games of the season to 2 teams that are going to also be in the playoffs, in the Texans and the Packers. Moving on, this won't take long. The Chargers played the Panthers. This is the game that allegedly got Bryce Young benched. I'll say this real quick, man. If you are a person, because there's a lot of people who like to make jokes about the trade that happened for them to be able to get Bryce Young. A lot of people who don't like Dave Tepper and blame the owner and stuff like that. I'll say this much. I don't know many NFL owners that I would even put in the category of like, because I think most of them are like David Tepper. They just are smart enough to not do it in a point where there's a camera around. We still don't talk about how John Mara was really gung-ho about looking out for that one kicker who was like a massive threat to his family. Anyway, this game, end of it, Bryce Young plays the whole thing, by the way. Bryce Young, number 1 pick in the NFL draft last year. C.J. Stroud, killing it this year. Don't know if you guys heard. Anthony Richardson looked pretty good in week 1, and then most of the first half of the season that he played in before he got hurt and his season was ended. And it's kind of stacking up that maybe the Panthers got the wrong one. And I'd like to implore you as a football fan to understand one concept. They were all the wrong one. Because there's not a team, there's not a player or a quarterback that's going to come in and make a team that is actively dismantling itself successful. The Carolina Panthers were the worst record in the NFL. And in response, they got rid of the 3 best defensive players they had on the field in Brian Burns, who's now with the Giants, Frankie Louvu, linebacker for the Commanders now, and Sam Franklin, the second or third, I forget. That was their response to the worst record in the NFL. They drafted Xavier Legette, which is great because last season they had multiple issues with the wide receiver position. They had a wide receiver who was a rookie demanding a trade. They had struggles with the offensive line. They went out and they got one guy in free agency. For you to sit here and try and pretend that Bryce Young is the problem is hilarious to me. Because there isn't a problem. The Panthers are doing exactly what they want to do. They're losing. That's what they're here to do. That's what they're trying to do. And only an idiot is going to use Bryce Young as a scapegoat. Now, Andy Dalton is put into the starting role. Dave Canales is a rookie head coach, and he had a great season last year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're starting to see that, Baker's pretty good at Baker Mayfield is very good at football. Who would have thought? Except, everything that he's done in the NFL, he's been able to figure out how to win, including when he played for the worst organization in the NFL, in the Cleveland Browns, in terms of winning stuff, including when he played for them. He still figured out how to somehow get them to the playoffs for the first time in, I think, 3 decades. Anyway, following up with this game, Andy Dalton's now the starter, right? Andy Dalton's probably going to go out there and be able to make some plays happen because that's how important it is to be a vet in the NFL. I'm not going to sit here and watch Andy Dalton be successful and say to myself, Bryce Young sucks. I'm going to go out here, watch Andy Dalton be successful, and say that is a culmination of a decade plus in the NFL. Because that's what it is. Anyway, Chargers played the Panthers. J.K. Dobbins, back from the dead, gotta be leading the votes for comeback player of the year, and it's only week 2. Another 100-yard game, and at one point during the broadcast for Chargers Panthers, they said the wildest stat that I still don't believe is true, but I'm gonna believe that it is true. It is that J.K. Dobbins is the first running back in Chargers history to have back-to-back 100-yard rushing games to open the season. Lest we forget, the best player in the history of the Chargers is running back LaDainian Tomlinson, which is crazy to think about because it just makes you wonder how many of those other crazy stats the Chargers have going for them as a franchise as a whole. Because let's be real, you're talking about a team that was the number 1 offense and number 1 defense in the NFL one season and didn't make the playoffs somehow. Whatever. Chargers played the Panthers, and Quentin Johnston is still alive, guys. Good to hear. Quentin Johnston, remember him from a couple years ago, super huge wide receiver, played for TCU, and everybody was like, oh, his biggest thing is that sometimes he drops the football. And then he got to the NFL, and sometimes he was dropping the football, and he became the butt of a joke as a rookie last season. Luckily, I think he's got 3 touchdowns in the first 2 games of the season or something like that. Turns out you get some time out there, you make some shit shake a little bit, man. I like to see Quentin Johnston going out there doing his thing just because I saw a bunch of people hating on a guy who just got here. And I think that's always stupid. The Chargers as a whole, offensive line-wise, massive upgrade, massive step forward. Back-to-back weeks where they have looked better than they did the week before, despite the fact that Justin Herbert's somehow not looking spectacular overall. And the defense for the Chargers, they turned up. They're flying around. A lot of the reason that a bunch of these Panthers plays didn't work is because it's the speed at which the Chargers were closing down on short yardage completions. They were going up against obviously a second-year quarterback who was having some accuracy issues throughout the course of this game. I'll be the first to admit it, but the fact of the matter is you have accuracy issues when the window is small, right? There was one play where Bryce almost gets intercepted because he threw a ball he He threw a ball for a wide receiver who was cutting in on a slant inside of a zone where there's two DBs that are about like 4 or 5 yards apart or whatever. He sees it, throws it, it hits the receiver in the hip, and the broadcaster's just like, he threw that late and behind. And I'm like, if he threw it in front, it was going to get picked up. That's how small the windows were throughout the course of this game. That's how small the windows that the Chargers defense was generating. And guess what? You get a couple of really tight windows throughout the course of the game. It makes it real hard to move the ball up and down the field. And as you can tell, the Panthers did not do that. They got 3 points on the board. The Chargers probably should have scored significantly more points in this game, but they should have scored significantly more points in this game. They do not look really super in tune on offense. They seem to be like a home run hitting type offense right now. We'll see how long that lasts before they figure it all out. Speaking of home runs, the Cardinals played the Rams, and I will start off. You can see the score right there, 41-10. I want to make sure I say this correctly because it is insane. I went back and I checked it. I counted the numbers myself. I did it for you guys. Kyler's back, which means that the Call of Duty memes are back too. They already were posting them as soon as week 2 is over because I guess the new Call of Duty comes out this Saturday or something like that. I don't know. My friends and I, we're all over 30. We don't play COD anymore because it is a reflex game. Anyway, if you play COD out there, let me know when the new game comes out so I can know not to buy it. Anyway, Kyler was out there doing the thing. He's been doing the thing the last couple of weeks, man. Last week, the Bills were able to adjust massively throughout the course of the game. A lot of it had to do with playing lower setting zones up front, making the windows a lot smaller, and they were banking on their pressure to get to him. They were able to do that. Anyway, Kyler got the greatest present that any quarterback can get, and it's a real number 1 wide receiver. He got Marvin Harrison Jr. Some of the plays that they linked up on throughout the course of this game were stuff that is obviously not in the playbook, and maybe that's concerning a little bit later on. Facts are, this is a divisional game with a head coach who's in the second year of his time in the NFL, and he went out there and he outdueled Sean McVay, the boy, the wonder kid, the boy genius, who obviously we're going to talk about what happened because it's pretty simple. The Cardinal, I got to read that stat that I wrote about this one. So Rams 10, Cardinals 41. How exceptional is this win? How insane is this win overall? This is the 5th time in 10 years that the Cardinals have beaten the Rams. Now you're saying to yourself, "Oh man, Ashton, that's crazy." That means that they beat them like 50% of the times they play them. No. The Cardinals and Rams are divisional opponents, silly. So they play each other twice a year. So it's 20 times that they've played them, and they've beat them 5 times in those 20 times. You can go and actually look at the all-time record. There was a streak where the Rams did not lose to the Cardinals for like 3 straight seasons, and it was not the Super Bowl years, which is the wild part. Anyway. Other big thing to come out of this game, Concrete Connor is back, which is apparently James Conner's nickname, and it kind of fits, man. The dude doesn't have like this crazy explosive or shifty running style. A lot of it is just, I'm going to run straight ahead. Let's see if you can keep up. Most of the time they can't. And it showed throughout the course of this game, man. They were bodying. Big thing to come out of this one. Andrew Van Ginkel apparently has a doppelganger. I did not know this. Maybe this is me being racist in this situation. That Dennis Gardeck looks exactly like Andrew Van Ginkel. Maybe they're just 2 white guys with really long hair. Anyway, he had 3 sacks, less than halfway. He is more than halfway to his career high in terms of sacks overall. He's been in the league for like 7 years, since like 2018. And he's got 3 sacks in just this game alone. If that didn't tell you anything, remember that one thing where I said it was going to be really simple when I explained what the problem with the Rams is? Because it was the same problem that it was last year. It was the same problem they had the year before that. It's the offensive linemen, they snapped the ball, and the defensive linemen have moved and the offensive linemen have not. The amount of pressure that was on Matthew Stafford throughout the course of this game was game-changing. if you couldn't tell based off the score. There was very few times where Stafford had time to even get to like the third read on a play, and you could tell like some of the big plays that Cooper were able to break off were due to some drag routes, which is a route that basically like never runs out of a time of efficiency, and it runs through multiple zones, and it's just about the timing that you see when he's open in a zone. He was able to get a huge play off that. Vast majority of these other plays, other than Kyron Williams being able to run the ball pretty successfully, which was really weird considering how easily it felt like the Cardinals were getting into the Rams' backfield throughout the course of the game. I will also say this: they did try to have Kyron Williams go out there and block. He missed, like he whiffed like half the times he was out there supposed to be able to block for Matthew Stafford. There was very few times where the Rams were able to get more than 2 positive plays in a row throughout the course of this game. And then there was very few times the Cardinals were able to get more than 2 negative plays in a row. So you can see how that could spiral out of control, like as a football game. Huge moment for Cardinals fans in this one, getting over the hump versus the Rams, who still have Sean McVay. They have Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, all those guys were healthy and played. The only person you could say is like Puka Nacua, who we're not even sure if he's going to even play that well this season, because last year all he did was have the greatest rookie season that a wide receiver in the NFL has ever had. What does that even mean? Like what does that mean? Anyway, other than that, other than the Cardinals being able to pass at will, there was times where the defense, specifically the pass rush for the Rams, won up front, and they had multiple defenders in the backfield chasing down Kyler Murray, and it didn't matter. It actually turned into a significantly worse situation because it was Marvin Harrison finding a gap in the zone and Kyler Murray locking in, throwing a dart. Completed it 30 yards down the field. That happened like 3 times. There was a couple times where they left Marvin Harrison Jr. In solo covers. There was a couple times where they were able to manipulate the zone that the Rams were running to trick the single high safety into going to the opposite half of the field where Marvin Harrison Jr. was, and he was just wide open down the sideline. It was ridiculous. It was, first of all, the breakout game that we all thought that Marvin Harrison Jr. was capable of doing, but also like Kyler Murray doing Kyler Murray things. A lot of these plays were off schedule, and they were still making stuff happen. Now, the question has always been, especially during the Cliff Kingsbury time period, when he was in charge of the Cardinals, are they going to be able to do anything past the halfway point of the season? That's basically what happened to Cliff Kingsbury. He would come out there, they'd have all the success in the world, and then people would adjust, and they wouldn't have an adjustment to the adjustment, which obviously, if that's the reason that you're not an NFL head coach anymore, it means that you're pretty damn good at your job. Although I will say right now, when I watch the Commanders offense, I am less than inspired. By the way, if you don't know, Cliff Kingsbury is the offensive coordinator for the Commanders this year. So, yeah, which is probably why I don't think they have a passing touchdown this season. A lot of their offense is like Jaden Daniels running around and Brian Robinson doing amazing things. Anyway, Andrew Van Ginkel's doppelganger, Dennis Gardeck. Let me know in the comments if you think they look alike or if I'm just being weird. Other game, this is the last one of the Snooze Fest games. I could have put another game in here, but I think it's later on in the category. If it's not, hopefully I'll remember to come back to this one because it had an interesting result for an interesting reason. The Bears played the Texans. This was Sunday Night Football. It was good to see the Texans be able to get a win in a different manner than just relying solely on the pass offense. And also, other aspect of this one, other variable, Joe Mixon basically had his leg taken out by, I wouldn't even say a hip drop tackle because, one, I don't think that should be a rule. It was just a tackle. It was just like somebody tackled Joe Mixon and landed on the back of his leg, and it pinned his ankle. And then he hasn't been in practice. I think he has not practiced. Today is Thursday, September 19th. It's 11:03. So probably by the time you watch this podcast, unless you're one of the people watching right now, it'll be Friday. He has not practiced as of Thursday, so highly unlikely he's going to be playing on Sunday because that looked like it was pretty bad. There was also a really horrific injury. I got to look this up real quick. I'm sorry. There was a really bad situation with DeForest Buckner that went down, and hold on. I got to see if he was tackling Josh Jacobs, and he was tackling Josh Jacobs, and he was on the ball of his foot, and then 3 linemen landed on his leg and crushed his foot while it was fully flexed. Yeah, he's on IR. So, yeah, it looked like he broke multiple things. And it was bad. It was bad. Anyway, just something to think about. Not something to think about DeForest Buckner's injury, but that was something I remembered and I forgot off the top of my head, and I needed to think about it. Anyway, Bears-Texans. Look, man, we're in week 2. It's obviously asking like entirely too much for you to sit there and say you expect Caleb Williams to come out here and light the world on fire 2 games into his season. What I have noticed is that he doesn't throw he's not the reason that they're struggling in some of these games. He's also like not throwing the game away because it'd be very easy. Like, people underestimate the value of being able to throw a game away in the NFL. It is so easy to just like give up the game, right? Like, look at what the Broncos are going through right now. There's a lot of times where Bo Nix is doing things that are a mix of being careful with the ball, but also being adventurous down the field. And so far this season, they've been punished for his adventuring down the field when he tries to be a little too adventurous with the football. And that could very easily be Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears, and it is not. So at the very least, it's that. Some people believe that the Bears are cursed in some way, shape, or form. Can't imagine why that would be. If you know about the Bears curse and the origin of it, please tell me. I would love to hear that story, if there is like a real curse that people believe in. That's all I got for Snooze Fest. Only took like 20 minutes or whatever. We're going to move on to the next category of games. These are the fun ones. These are the heartbreakers. These are the heartbreak games. These are the games that if your team lost it, it ruined your entire Sunday. And it probably ruined your Monday, and more than likely, it pissed you off to the point where you didn't watch Thursday Night Football, which I'd like to point out, and I'd always like to say, as much as I love more football, I'm a big proponent of you watch Thursday Night Football retroactively. It's totally cool. Yes, wild stuff happens on Thursday Night Football. The fact that we still live in a time where people are still playing Thursday Night Football is kind of insane because it doesn't feel like we've adjusted the schedule to the point where I've always been a proponent of the idea that if you are going to play a non-Sunday primetime game, the following maybe Monday Night Football gives you an advantage, right? Thursday Night Football puts you at a hindrance, and I've always thought if you play Thursday Night Football, you should immediately go into your bye week the following week. But I don't think there's enough Thursday Night Football games for that to be the case. But I think it should be one of the triggers for when a bye week is placed in a season. Because that means that, yes, that would mean that teams could get like a week 1 bye week, which would be crazy to think about. Like, you just like, oh yeah, like I feel great, and we're going on vacation again because a lot of these guys went on vacation throughout the course of the summer, and you want that late bye week because you never know what's gonna hurt, because it's all probably gonna hurt when it's all said and done. But I've always been a proponent of later on in the season, Thursday Night Football and then your bye week would be amazing for a lot of teams in the NFL. Anyway. The heartbreakers. We're going to start at the top. This is probably the biggest one on this list. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals put on another banger out there for the people, for free. This wasn't even on wherever they show. It's Prime Video. By the way, just a heads up, if you want to watch Thursday Night Football for free, you should get a Twitch account. They still show it on there for free. You just have to have an account. Nothing more, nothing less. You don't have to pay for Prime or anything like that. Just have a Twitch account and you can watch Thursday Night Football for free. Best part about it is not connected to like your cable or anything like that. So you can watch it on your phone anywhere you want to. It's Twitch. Twitch is pretty good interface or whatever. There is a chat feed. There's a chat section, which is completely useless. It's completely useless. Anyway, just shut the chat off and you can watch the game for free. The camera, like, you can watch it in like 4K too. So, and probably cast it to your TV if you really needed to without having to pay like $14 a month for Amazon Prime. Anyway, this game was defined by the absolutely insane fact that the Bengals got 3 turnovers in this game versus Patrick Mahomes. One of them was against Carson Steele, who, plot twist, now starting running back that we assume for the Kansas City Chiefs at this point. It is Thursday. Samaje Perine was already on the roster. Samaje Perine is on the Chiefs roster now after after being on the Bengals. Anyway, something to think about. Carson Steele, right running back, starting in the NFL. Huge moment for white people everywhere. 3 turnovers generated in the course of this game. One was a fumble from Carson Steele. One was the reverse Odell Beckham Jr. one-handed catch that should have went viral but didn't somehow. So maybe Cam Taylor-Britt's just not as cool as OBJ, but that catch from OBJ launched his career. So hopefully Cam Taylor-Britt's going to get something from it. Because I'm sure that photo looks insane, and I don't know what glove logo he has on it, but if you're that company, definitely hook Cam Taylor-Britt up. Anyway, one-handed snag, in motion, falling backwards, coming up with an interception against Patrick Mahomes of all people, right? Crazy stuff. And I think he was defending Jamar Chase. Or I'm sorry. I think he was defending Rashid Shaheed, right? That's what I think I'm confusing the Saints wide receiver. Anyway, they got 2 interceptions and a fumble recovery and still lost this game by 1. It's crazy to think about. For the most part, up front, offensively, it felt like the run game was non-existent for the Bengals, and that does not help a bunch. They were really struggling to get the ball to Jamar Chase throughout the course of this game, but Joe Burrow, as he always does, found a way to get the ball down the field. If you're a fantasy football person, Mike Gesicki is back. He is clearly, based off week 1 and week 2, there is a distinct effort within the Bengals offense to get Mike Gesicki the ball out in space. They're not even asking him to run block anymore. They just be like, hey man, you big, get out there. You big, they small, get out there, get the ball. And it's been working so far. He had a touchdown that was called back off of, I want to say, a holding penalty on the opposite side of where the play went, but nonetheless, the hold allowed Joe Burrow enough time to get the ball to Mike Gesicki, and that does affect the play. But the Chiefs, for the most part in this one, had to rely on Isaiah Pacheco a lot more than they usually do to go out there and get them some yardage, get them some plays up the field. And Joe Burrow, like I said before, the Bengals, they really just couldn't get anything going, man. And a lot of their drives were indemnified by big plays down the field in terms of big chunk yardage. There was very few of these drives where they were dinking and dunking down there, showing an utmost control of the situation. And I think it's because they're working on Chris Brown, who's their who's the number 1 running back for their team, and trying to figure that whole situation out. But it comes down to a couple of stops. The Bengals defense went out there and they did their thing again. They have the nastiest knack of bringing out the worst in the worst in the Chiefs. Every single time, there's something about the way the Bengals play defense, and obviously they have some similar players, but they've had, Cam Taylor-Britt was there when they first started this whole back and forth type of deal. Sam Hubbard, Trey Hendrickson, Sam Wilson, the linebacker, all those guys have been there for a good chunk of time. Von Bell's been there for a long time as well. But the fact of the matter is there's just something about that mix of players that gets the worst out of the Chiefs often. And it may be because they play them at a higher frequency than other teams do. Because I think that if you look at it in totality over the last the last 3 years, I think the Bengals have played the Chiefs just as much as their divisional opponents have. If you're an opponent, a divisional opponent for the Chiefs, I think you've played the Chiefs just as much as the Bengals have throughout the course of the season. So, because they've had regular season games that happen too, plus the playoff game. So, but yeah, that goes a long way in terms of breeding or getting that familiarity with each other, right? And you get stuff like this. It gets more and more interesting every single time they play each other. A lot of people, I'm gonna say this right now. Zach Taylor. People been coming for Zach Taylor since he got that job because they didn't like that story that came out where Zach Taylor got the job because he knows Sean McVay, and I'm assuming they're cool or something like that. But it's there wasn't a ton of evidence to show that Zach Taylor had mastered or knew how to implement the type of offense that Sean McVay was running. But this was during that time period where if you looked at Sean McVay long enough and somebody important saw it, they were like, Sean McVay likes this guy. And then you were the head coach of an NFL team, and now Zach Taylor has gone to multiple AFC championship games, right? Or is it AFC semifinals? One was the AFC championship game and one was the semifinal. Anyway, yeah, this game was exciting. If you have a chance to go back and watch it again, you should. It was pretty fucking dope. Overall, a lot of great defensive plays on both sides of the ball. As like I said before, Isaiah Pacheco really carried the Chiefs, especially when they were struggling to get any form of consistency on offense. He was the bridge between the good passing plays, right? And you need that kind of mix when you're going up against a Bengals defense that is just stupid good. More and more of what happened in week 1 versus the Patriots comes out, like, especially considering, like, we're going to talk about the Patriots next. They looked really good versus the Seahawks. A lot of why they were able to beat the Bengals stems from the number of turnovers that they were able to generate, which some, I want to say 2 out of the 3 they generated were the faults of just the fault of the Bengals as a whole as an offense. Anyway, this game is spectacular. It came down to a game-winning field goal that the Chiefs hit. Tell me a story you haven't heard before. The Seattle Seahawks, who are now 2-0 on the season, undefeated with their rookie head coach, Mike Macdonald. Also, something interesting to talk about what happens later on in this show. We're going to talk about what the Ravens are up to since they lost Mike Macdonald. It's interesting. Seahawks 23, Patriots 20. The Patriots are overachieving despite being they're 1-2 now because Thursday Night Football is over. They lost. Drake May apparently played. I haven't watched Thursday Night Football. I'm going to watch it tomorrow. Watch it later on today, Friday. It's about to be Friday in like 45 minutes. Anyway, Drake May played. It's only a matter of time, Jacoby. You know this. The Brisket, I think, did a really good job in week 1. Week 2 felt like toe-to-toe with Geno Smith, who had one of his best games as a quarterback for the Seahawks so far, and that's saying a lot. DK Metcalf, JSN, breakout JSN game. Now, new layer of the offense for the Seahawks completely emerges. Insane to think about the potential that goes along with that, where don't have to depend on Tyler Lockett to go out there and do everything as the other half of the duo. Got Tyler Lockett, got JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigma, for those of you who are uninitiated, plus DK Metcalf. And then, obviously, when Kenneth Walker gets back, does not look like he's playing this Sunday. He hasn't practiced all week. But getting all 4 of those guys back, plus Geno Smith, plus a defense that, I'm going to be honest, I was super concerned about, considering the number of changes that they made up front. Got the number one pass rusher back from last season in Nwosu. Now having Dotson. I've been working on memorizing the young man's name. And then they also have Jerome Baker, who, if I'm not mistaken, well, I know he played for the Dolphins, but I think he went to college at U of H or something like that. Anyway, Jerome Baker, really good last season for the Dolphins, has been for the last couple of years. Also hilarious, there's like a mic'd up segment where with Jerome Baker, and he's like walking around for like 5 minutes trying to find his mom. Very funny. Anyway, Jerome Baker, Dotson, doing a fantastic job of stopping the run. The secondary has been on point the last couple of years, and they've been on a steady rise upward. Now, of course, it comes down to if they can maintain it, because it's not like we're going to sit here and talk about how the Patriots are some kind of nuclear level. They're not an offense that's turned it into hyperdrive, right? As one Adam Gase would say. They have not kicked it into hyperdrive, but this game went back and forth. Patriots able to stay in this game because of some good throws from Geno Smith, but mostly from the excellent running of the football by Ramondre Stevenson, man. Last season, they were splitting carries between Ramondre and Damian Harris. If you want to know what Damian Harris is up to, I can tell you he was on a Pro Football Focus podcast, not the main podcast, but one of the spinoff podcasts, and he talked about what he's been up to in his career and what he's been doing since he retired, which is really cool. So definitely go check it out. He talks about what it was like having Nick Saban as a coach, and as usual, just like every time you hear an Alabama player talk about what it was like having Nick Saban as their head coach, it was insane. It was the insanity was brutal. The insanity of just how that guy's a real person. Anyway, and then of course this past weekend, the clip of Pat McAfee feeding Nick Saban steak on national television was hilarious. Anyway, Seahawks, Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson, MVP of this game for both teams because he was killing it. He was the best, probably second or third best player behind DK Metcalf, who, by the way, first half of this game locked by Christian Gonzalez. That guy is scary. That guy was stride for stride with DK Metcalf, ran his route for him, and almost picked off a play. Almost picked off one of the throws from Geno Smith early on in this game. Would also like to point out he was eye level with DK Metcalf, which I think is a sight that DK is probably not familiar with when it comes to line up against a cornerback. And Christian Gonzalez looks like he's going to be that guy. Looks like you could be that dude pretty soon here, especially, you're in week 2 of the season and you go up against one of the best receivers down the field, and there's multiple times where you can watch film or you can watch reps or watch plays where he is down the field by himself with DK Metcalf and he's able to get a win. There's other times where obviously DK Metcalf, he had over 100 yards receiving in this game. He balled the fuck out. JSN did he was the zone killer in this one, so he was able to find a lot of those small gaps. What do you know? Ohio State wide receiver, what did we say earlier? Ohio State wide receiver, really, really talented possession wide receiver who makes short yardage explosive plays. Pretty much what JSN did. If you don't know, Jackson Smith and Jigba went to Ohio State. So, yeah, it's almost like Brian Hartline has a type. That was weird. I feel like I said that before. This game goes into overtime. Should have been in the Seahawks' hand because the Seahawks played pretty terribly in the first half of this one. And then the second half rolls around, all of a sudden everything, they can't miss, right? The Patriots' defense looks fantastic for a bunch of guys that aren't supposed to be good. But only time will tell. Anyway, this game goes into overtime, and the Seahawks have a 7-minute drive to win this thing. Absolute, if you are a Seahawks fan, this is the kind of stuff you want to see. Yes, the Patriots look like they're a pretty decent team overall, but the fact of the matter is you want to see the Seahawks show multiple ways of being able to win games. They started off the season against two teams that are probably not going to be in the playoffs in the Denver Broncos and the Patriots, but nonetheless have gone out there and gotten they've gotten some wins. They came back in the second half versus the Patriots, a team that has a really good defense. And then they it felt like they beat the brakes off the Broncos, despite what the score said. Other game in this one, these are heartbreakers. The Dolphins played the Bills, and the Bills ran away with this one pretty early on. It's obviously going to weigh heavily on a lot of players when they see their quarterback laying unconscious on the ground for a good period of time. I'd just like to talk about, since we're here and we're talking about football, I'll talk about the main thing that you take away from this game. One, the Bills now 2-0, and I think back-to-back games where they scored over 30 points. So I think they scored 41 last week versus the Cardinals, if I'm not mistaken. Back-to-back games scoring over 30 points. Dolphins defense, we got a lot of questions. Does not look good when we find ourselves yet again in a situation where they cannot generate a pass rush. It feels like they haven't had the pass rush that they've wanted for 2 years. They had Andrew Van Ginkel on the defensive line to take up for Adrian Phillips, and they let him walk during free agency. And Van Ginkel's now doing a great job with the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to talk about that game a little bit later on because the Vikings may be the number one defense in the NFL, but Van Ginkel's killing it over there. He literally has an interception and 3 sacks, and it's 2 games into the season. He almost had a game-winning interception as well versus the 49ers at the on their or what turned out to be their penultimate drive or something like that. The Bills take on the Dolphins. The big thing to take away from it is Tua Tagovailoa has sustained another concussion. They have not released the grade of the concussion, but you have to imagine with some of the stuff you've seen, it's either 3 or 4, right? The visual stuff, especially considering we're getting into that territory of, if you guys don't know how concussions work, it is when your brain hits your cranium or your skull, and it basically hits the reset button, essentially. That's what a knockout is in boxing. Your brain hit, the brain tissue, or your brain that is of tissue, hit your skull, the bone, so hard that your brain shut down. And that's a real thing, right? A lot of people talking about how they don't think that Tua should come back and play. He's going to come back and play. A lot of people talking about how, the money makes it easier. I'll say this much. I think the money also gives massive an important thing. It gives Tua time to recover. Because basically since Tua joined up with the Dolphins, there's been like a ticking clock of people trying to get him out the door. From the Brian Flores situation, where Brian Flores has talked about how Stephen Ross was like bribing him to lose games. There's situations where, obviously what the plan was, and are we just going to assume that that's like canon now? The plan was they didn't think Tua was going to turn out to be the greatest quarterback of all time, and so they had a chance to go and get the greatest quarterback of all time in Tom Brady. He offered him a portion of the team, and so in preparation for Tom Brady to leave and become a free agent, they built the team into like star-studded win now mode, very similar to what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did, minus the fact the Buccaneers already had like a bunch of really talented draft picks on the lineup. But I'm assuming we all understand that like the plan was to usurp Tua and remove him from the team, or in some way, shape, or form make him the backup to Tom Brady. And so that's why the team is built the way it is now with Tua at the helm, because, well, one, somebody figured out what the plot was and probably didn't take that much effort. Anyway, that being said, Tua's here in this situation. He's been under fire, basically from the fan base from the jump in a lot of different situations. A lot of people don't hold others to the same account that they hold Tua to, in particular the offensive line, right? And I'm not saying this in the sense of like the offensive line is the reason that Tua gets concussed, because it's not true. I think Tua is one of many players that has had a lot of brain trauma throughout the course of his career, and it just hasn't presented itself until much later on. He's a smaller guy, so the force enacted, because there's one of these concussions last season was a defensive tackle didn't even land on him. They grabbed his jersey and slung him down to the ground, and his whole, like, he just face planted into the ground and was unconscious, right? That is obviously a sign of one. I mean, the fact of the matter is, we are all susceptible in different ways to different types of brain trauma. Some of us are more susceptible, some of us are not. But the fact of the matter is, when you're smaller, people can exert more force on your body than they would if you were a larger person, right? And that is a factor in all of this. And there's just no way around it. To a side, and I'm not saying it's a detriment or anything like that. I'm just saying it's a fact that he's smaller and other people are bigger on the field, and they can hit him harder because of his size in comparison to the force they can generate. There's no like ifs, ands, or buts about that. But the whole like he should stop playing thing, I doubt that's going to happen unless he magically comes to the decision. Or I know for me personally, it'd be kind of tough to. I'm sure his parents are trying to do their best of trying to find some thin line of like, hey man, you've done a lot, and they would much rather have their son until the day that they pass away than watching their son potentially have something just go horrendously wrong that could have been avoided, right? But I will say this, I don't think the group of people who take, like, who, I get it, man. Like, when you're in your group chats and you're, or some of you are even sick enough just to be on the internet in the comment section. Some of you, like, derive, like, a lot of pleasure from watching the suffering of other people. And it shows up in moments like this. And I just want to ask you to look at yourself. I know that's real tough. Self-introspection is real tough. But I know last season, I listened to Pardon My Take, and last season when the concussion thing was going on, there was a guy on the show who I actually don't like at all. And I'm glad that he's not on the show anymore. But he did mention when he went to the game, he's a Jets fan. And he mentioned that some of the Jets fans that were there at the games were like making fun of Tua by doing the thing that happened when his hands locked up. And I thought that was some demented level shit for a human being to do. Anyway, whatever. I'm sure Tua's going to get the best medical research, best information, best stuff that he can possibly get to make sure that he's back at 100% before he steps back onto the field. He's going to IR. The Dolphins are in a bad spot because whether they want you to know it or not, they were all in on this whole thing. But yeah, by the way, going back to that Seahawks game, I'm looking at my notes. I wrote down how JSN had 12 catches for 117 yards. And I did not know this until I looked it up. It was on Pro Football Reference. Shout out to like the greatest encyclopedia of football ever. But he's from Nacogdoches, like from where SFA is at. I thought that was kind of wild. If you're from Texas, you know Nacogdoches is like a place that's like in the middle of nowhere. It's a college. It's a really small college town, and it produced an NFL player. It's like really random. Anyway, the stuff about the Dolphins. Yeah, their season could already be down the drain based off of the fact that they do not have the best quarterback they have available to them. I have a strange feeling that there's been a phone call made to the guy that I mentioned before. There has to have been in some way, shape, or form. Even if it wasn't the general manager for the Dolphins, it definitely was by Stephen Ross. Something to think about. Falcons, Eagles. This one was Monday Night Football. And we all saw this one in 4K. This was brutal because it felt like it was the Eagles finally getting the engine back running like they did a couple of years ago when they made the run to the Super Bowl. It felt like there was a good blend of Saquon Barkley getting the ball, great blend of Jalen Hurts finally starting to run the ball again when the options started to run out. Felt like he kind of got his hand forced, and once he got one going, he got another one going, then he got another one, then he got another one, and then the offense started kind of coming way easier because they were more concerned about Jalen Hurts being able to get up and down the field, and it created even more time for Deontay Smith to get open, who, by the way, this has happened once every year since he's been a rookie. There's been a time where A.J. Brown has not been available and Deontay Smith has had to step into the number one spot, and he's done a really good job, mainly because he's obviously a really talented football player. He's one of the many extremely stupid talented Alabama wide receivers who have come into the NFL, like Mark Cooper and all those guys, right? Mark Cooper, Julio Jones, all that kind of stuff like that. All those guys like that. He went out there, felt like he took another step forward, which is hard to believe because sometimes it really does feel like it doesn't make any sense how he is a number two. But then you see A.J. Brown play football, and you're like, I get some of why he's a number two. Anyway, they had that going on. Dallas Goedert got kind of mixed into the offense as well. But most importantly, it felt like the Eagles were really balanced. It felt like the Eagles were finding ways to get up and down the field. And I'll tell you this much, 21 points versus this Falcons defense is, and I think we're going to look back on it throughout the course of this season, and you're going to see how absurd it was to be able to get 3 touchdowns versus the Atlanta Falcons, because they are a top 10 defense in the NFL. I've already mentioned it once. I'll say it again. I'm probably going to have to say it every single week. The Falcons right now have the best defense they've had in 15 years. Probably more than that. And it showed itself on Monday Night Football. They're buying time for Kirk Cousins in the offense to figure things out. Bijan Robinson looks amazing when everybody can't key in on him, when there's a threat for the pass to be able to actually be completed. And that really goes to show like so much about what a competent quarterback can do. Also, turns out the older guy with the messed up Achilles just needed some more time to adjust to the situation. They finally started running plays out of the I formation and started running play action that helped out a bunch in creating that variance in their offense that they need. Obviously, everybody's going to talk about how they don't have Kyle Pitts with 200 yards and 4 touchdowns because you're all obsessed with this idea that Kyle Pitts is like Travis Kelce but better and more athletic with a better body, whatever. Maybe he's just not in the same scenarios. Who would have thought? He's just not in the same situations as Travis Kelce. Anyway, Travis Kelce, immensely talented as well, by the way. Would dare say second greatest tight end of all time. Who knows when it's all said and done. But yeah, Falcons-Eagles was a heartbreaker. This one came down to the Eagles going out there, getting their final drive. The defense for the Eagles actually showed up and played pretty well until the second half of this game, where clearly the Falcons had kind of turned it on and really got up the field and were able to make some stuff happen. anyone else noticing that, like, randomly Ray McLeod has been getting a lot of catches the last couple of weeks? Kirk Cousins has been focusing on him a lot. If you're a fantasy guy, just something to think about. Ray McLeod, wide receiver, formerly of the San Francisco 49ers, getting a lot of love from Kirk Cousins. Who would have thought? And other than that stupid 15-yard penalty he got, somebody like pulled his mouthpiece out and he went over and punched him in the side of the head. And I don't think they saw that one, but then they saw something later on in the game or whatever. Anyway, Falcons go out there. They get the go-ahead play. They get the go-ahead to go up 22-21. Comes down to a game-winning drive, and the zone defense strikes again because, once again, Jesse Bates is on the case. And he comes up with an interception after Jalen Hurts realizes that Deontay Smith is open just like a hair too late, and he ends up floating the ball because he has to throw it over the top of the defense, and it gives Jesse Bates enough time to run over and intercept it. And the Falcons get a clutch win in prime time after 7 p.m. on Monday Night Football. Look at that. All Kirk Cousins needed was direct access to lemon pepper wings and Magic City, and he's a totally different guy. I bet you this week his bedtime has been like 8:30. Been killing it, man. Anyway, other stuff. Let's talk. This is the oh my category of games that had interesting results for different reasons. We'll see what's on here because I think I said one of them. So yeah, one of the games I forgot to put on here. It is Steelers versus. I forgot to put Steelers versus Broncos on here. I had a bunch of stuff to say, but most importantly, I have a friend who's a Steelers fan. So like whenever I watch the Steelers play, I watch all their reps, and it's I watch all their plays, and it's really funny. For the most part, I'd like to point this out. This is a dark day. This is a dark day for a man by the name of Kirk Ferentz. If you don't know him, Kirk Ferentz is the current head coach for the Iowa Hawkeyes football team. And I can't imagine how he felt when he was alerted on Sunday afternoon after practice, coming off the field, that an NFL football game went down with the Steelers and the Broncos, and the only touchdown scored in it was by an Iowa Hawkeye. That's tough. That's tough. That's tough. Anyway, some of you will get that joke. It's an inside joke. Not really an inside joke. It's an inside football joke. If you're a college football fan, you get that. But yeah, the only actually forgot his name because they have Pat Freiermuth, and it was not Pat Freiermuth that scored the touchdown, but the Steelers, Steelers tight ends 0. Yeah. Steelers tight ends. It's the big guy. That's literally, I like calling him that. The big guy. Not Rodney Williams. That's stupid. Nope. Sorry. Steelers backup tight end. It's Darnell Washington. There we go. Pat Freiermuth is the starter, and then Darnell Washington, who blew up during combine season because he knew how to hit a blocking sled. And I said that in a very dry voice. I fucking meant it. Like the combine highlight of him hitting a blocking sled correctly went like semi-viral or whatever because he was able to just like blow it off the line. It was like a 225-pound sled, which, by the way, if you've ever hit a blocking sled, you know it doesn't matter how much weight they put on it. It feels like it weighs a mountain. Whatever a mountain weighs, it is what that sled weighs. But anyway, he's Darnell Washington is a 6'7", like 250-pound tight end. And it is not dawned upon the Steelers offensive coordinator the last 2 years to be like, maybe we throw him the ball? No. Anyway, hopefully, well, not if Kirk Ferentz has anything to say about it. That won't be happening for you, Darnell. Watch yourself. 1 touchdown. You've gone too fucking far, and you know it. The Steelers dominated this game on both sides of the ball, despite what this scoreboard says. It says 13-6 when it's all said and done. Broderick Jones killed what could have been a touchdown drive for the Steelers with back-to-back holding penalties early on in this one, which was tough because it was like Justin Field threw some of his best passes throughout the course of this drive, and for it to end up just being a field goal was kind of brutal. And Justin Fields' best pass, he hit like George Pickens while rolling to the right-hand side of the field, and Pickens was streaking up the field. So he's rolling this way. Pickens is he's basically, 4 yards from being out of bounds. He throws it straight up the field over the top of a defensive back and drops it in like a bucket. It was one of the reasons why Justin Fields was able to get so much attention to even be drafted as high as he was. And they bought him enough time to be able to pull it off. I will say this, the run game for the Steelers is their bread and butter. Najee Harris is so back. Jaylen Warren is so back. And they're going to keep it that way. My friend and a lot of other people call the Steelers Iowa East because of the way that they play football. And they also have like 4 dudes from Iowa on their roster. So anyway, yeah, Iowa, not Iowa State. Bo Nix, I've watched 2 games of him. One thing I can't confirm, can't tell you if he's good or if he's bad, because it would be foolish to sit there and watch 2 games of a young player on a team that we don't even know if it's properly structured to even win. He ain't scared. He ain't never scared. I've watched him get lit up on some of these sacks. I've seen him get out there and run in open space and get hit. I've seen him throw passes that have been nearly intercepted. I've seen him throw passes that get intercepted. And it feels like he doesn't back down from those situations. He's ready to, it's like he forgets about it, moves on to the next play. And it's interesting to see that from a young player, because you have to wonder how long will that last. Because being okay with messing up, I think, is a big part of being in the NFL. The other part is doing the work to eliminate the messing up, right? That's the important part. That part, that's the question. The Broncos couldn't string together a drive with multiple 10-plus yard plays, which is wild as fuck levels of smothering defense. So either the Seahawks and the Steelers are lockdown defenses and we just don't know it. They gave up 20 points to the Patriots, the Seahawks did, and the Steelers, they are one of the best defenses in the NFL. Or the Broncos just need a better offensive line. It feels like a lot of these times that Bo Nix is out there, he's kind of like, really struggling. The Steelers also covered the run like they knew every time a run call was being made, and they have Minkah Fitzpatrick as a safety. So if they actually did know that information, it wouldn't be that surprising. But the entire all 11 guys ran to the ball like they knew it was a run. Late in the third, Justin Fields runs to his left-hand side, runs out of bounds, and he runs over a down marker holder, and he smashes the back of his head into the ground. This is the 4th time I've seen one of these guys who holds the down marker smash his head on the ground in 2 weeks. Weird. It feels like it's at a higher percentage than usual, and I have to ask the question, when do we start making a change? You know what I mean? When do we get some spry young guys? Because I think, like, even if you put like a 24-year-old out there, a fully padded Justin Fields running at you, even when he's trying to decelerate, bumping you so hard that you hit the ground pretty hard that you need like medical attention. Maybe we need to get some young brains out there. Everything in the NFL is about getting younger. Maybe we get some younger guys out there in the dangerous spots, like the down marker holder. Yes, they may be hungover. Yes, they may be high, but you know what they are? Expendable. The elderly in our community, we got to protect those guys. But yeah, he got hit pretty hard. There's a guy in the Texans Bears game that got hit really hard. There's a dude last season who got his leg broken on the sideline during a Chiefs game, I believe, holding a down marker because like Nick Bolton slid into his leg and he couldn't jump to get out of the way in enough time, so he ended up like dislocating his kneecap or something like that, and they accidentally showed it on TV. Or on purpose, who knows, man. I used to work as like a technical director, so I was like in charge of making sure that the truck stayed on air during their broadcast. And I always wonder, there's times where like wild stuff gets on air, and I feel like because I know how much meticulous work goes into how they organize the truck, how they organize those shots and the cameramen, I feel like every time we see something messed up, it has to be on purpose, including like that guy breaking his leg. But yeah, no, I don't know. Anyway, get rid of the old people. Get rid of the old people as down marker holders. Get them to do something else that doesn't have the potential for them to like shatter their kneecaps. You know what I mean? By the way, there's one. I watched this game. Watched game one. Watch the Broncos play game one of the season. There is one thing I need to say out loud, and I need, this is random guy on the internet, me talking to Super Bowl champion head coach Sean Payton. I need you to do something for me. Stop putting the fucking drag routes in the plays, bro. Stop putting the drag routes in any of the Broncos plays. So many plays have drag routes in them for the Broncos, and Bo Nix thinks they're open every single time, when in actuality, they're not. He's throwing his wide receivers into 3-yard catches. Please remove the drag routes. That's it. That's all. Just take him out of every single offensive play completely. Turn it into some other route. You know what I mean? It's killing. Look, man. It looks like it's open and it's not. And Bo is getting like kind of locked in on some of them. And it turns bad real fast when he does that. Half of the Broncos' drives were single-digit net yards. Steelers defense doing Steelers defense things. They did not score until the 10-minute mark of the fourth quarter of this game, if you wanted to know how the day for the Broncos went. Oh, I almost forgot. TJ Watt got the ghost sack. TJ Watt ran. He rushed from the right-hand side, ran around the globe, as some people like to say, like where you have like the little hoop out and you run completely around the circle, trying to maintain your angle. He beats his defensive, you know what he did? He beat the right tackle and then came back towards Bo Nix. Bo knew he was back there. TJ Watt's on the ground, and there's no way that Bo Nix could have known that, but he knew that TJ Watt was around him. TJ flails his arms in the general vicinity of Bo Nix's legs, and Bo Nix like drops to the ground, and they call it a sack. Go sack. Go check it out. It's TJ Watt's sack. I want to say it's like his second one in the game versus Bo Nix, but it's pretty funny because he does not touch him. And he just goes down, and they just assume that he got touched by TJ Watt. Anyway, something to think about. The Oh My category, we're still doing this one. I forgot to actually talk about the games that are on the screen. But, don't worry. I'm trying to scroll to my notes here because this one was over pretty quick. First play of the game was the most realistic play ever for me personally. Graham Gano Graham Gano with the new kickoff rule kicks off, right? It gets taken by Austin Eckler all the way back for a touchdown, and they call a pretty sketchy holding penalty, but you can also see in the process of Austin Eckler running to score a touchdown, Graham Gano pulls his hamstring as Austin Eckler's like 15 yards away, and he's trying to make that tackle. But highly relatable. Trying to run after people, for me personally, trying to run after people who are significantly faster than you and then getting hurt. Super relatable, bro. Also, really wild. We're starting to see like a really diverse group of kick returners. Like Deebo Samuel's Sr. ran back kicks for the 49ers this weekend. I thought that was kind of wild. Number one wide receiver, risking him out there during kickoffs, all that kind of stuff like that. But Austin Eckler, who's the backup running back for the Commanders, and one of their most explosive players on offense as well, was out there at kick returner at 29 years old. That's really impressive. And then got a touch. To me, it should have been a touchdown. They're always looking for some reason to call back these. Me personally, I think the reason the kickoff sucks so much is because refs out here calling every single thing that doesn't affect the play. And the quote-unquote holding penalty that they were talking about did not affect Austin Eckler's ability to get up the sideline and score that touchdown. But it wiped it away nonetheless. Anyway, that was the first play of the game, by the way. Run back by Austin Eckler. Shout out to him. Always doing his thing, the freak athlete that he is. Does Cliff trust Jaden? Cliff Kingsbury, does he trust Jaden Daniels? It feels like so many of the play designs are the playmaker plays, which are the series of short yardage plays that get good offensive players in open space that don't require like necessarily a ton of reads. Like there's screens left, screens right, different types of screens. There's the 3-yard curl routes because those are underneath the zone coverages of most of the defenses that you're going to face. So it gives wide receivers a chance to turn around and try and make a move on a defensive back and then get upfield. And then the rest of them are Brian Robinson doing Brian Robinson Jr. things, running up the field and getting mad yards. Oh, man. This game could have been way more out of control. The final score was 21-18. Could have been way more out of control for the Commanders. And I just read my note, and it reminded me of how dumb this sequence of things was. This is towards the end of the first quarter. It's 4th and 1 on the 6-yard line, and the Commanders are like gonna go for it, right? They're in a situation where like, hey man, like we're okay with turning the ball over on the Giants 6-yard line, right? Because no offense or anything like that, the other guy is Daniel Jones. Actually, all the offense in the world. The other guy is Daniel Jones, so we're good if we turn it over on the 6-yard line, bro. But they're on the 6-yard line. They set the formation. They call a timeout, to have a conversation about what play they're going to run, make sure everybody knows what they're going to do. They get back in formation, false start. And now it is 4th and 11. 4th and 11. And so they have to take a field goal. So, yeah, taking points off the board. In theory, taking points off the board. Just stuff like that are, and it was a false start on a tight end. And it's the stuff with the young players, young teams, stuff like that. That it kind of feels like that's the kind of stuff that only happens with teams who are like slightly unorganized or teams that out of a timeout is a level of frustration that I don't think many coaches you're ever going to see. To get out of a timeout and get a penalty for false starting. Right? That's insane. By the way, tight ends are back, and Jaden Daniels and Zach Ertz are making that happen. Mike Gesicki was back for the Bengals, and Travis Kelce's been looking. I think first 2 games of the season, Travis Kelce's looked a lot better than he did at the start of last season. Because there was a good chunk. There was a really weird lull in the middle of the season where like Travis Kelce was just like non-existent in the Chiefs offense, but. Tight ends are back, bro. Brock Bowers was balling in that Raiders-Ravens game. I think he was like the second most targeted player on the field for the Raiders. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. But the Commanders are cruising towards the oldest story in all of modern-day football. Super mobile quarterback gets destroyed by the reality of the NFL in the process of the team getting wins. There were so many plays throughout the course of this game where Jaden Daniels just gets exploded. Like it's so messed up because there were like memes about this. There was a video that went around that it got to the point where like NFL Network broadcasters were talking about it on air. ESPN people were talking about it on air. It's a compilation of Jaden Daniels exploding as he tries to run the ball at LSU and gets hit by like 3 defensive linemen. In a situation where like he's not trying to like make any wiggle room or be shifty or anything like that. He's just trying to run ahead and get as many yards as he can, and he gets hit. And when I say hit, I mean he gets smacked in some of these situations, right? That is like for real what it looked like when they were playing the Giants. The Giants got one of the best defensive lines in the NFL by like statistical analysis from previous years, right? Like Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, plus Dexter Lawrence. That is one of the stoutest defensive lines in the NFL. I will point this out. Brian Robinson Jr. made it look like it was a little easy to run on him, but whatever. But yeah, it was tough, man. It was so wild to watch how many times he was just like, yep, gonna run around the edge, and whoever's there, I'm gonna lower my shoulder and jump forward. And what do you know? He got hit by like 4 people. That has an expiration date. And hopefully it's not this season. Hopefully it's not next. Hopefully it's not 3 years from now. Hopefully it's way further down the line. But more likely than not, I'm 32 years old right now in this moment, and I'm sad to say I've seen this story play out plenty of times, young buck. As a matter of fact, I seen this story play out in the jersey you're wearing. The guy who just got fired from ESPN. Shout out Robert Griffin III. I don't know what's going on at ESPN, like talent-wise. It seems like there's this massive purge of money for, I'm assuming, a multitude of situations. They're probably getting ready for that massive deal for Venue, that's what it's called, right? The streaming service where it's like Warner Brothers, Fox, and Disney all combining into like one for sports, which is violates so many antitrust laws, which is why it hasn't happened yet. Everybody, I think, in sports media is very worried about this potentially happening because it would more than likely, it would reduce the number of jobs in sports media significantly for content creators, again, by a lot. Because there's so many chances to be able to take stuff that's already been done and just recycle it and re-earn money off of it. And on top of that, consolidating sporting events means that you need fewer crew members to cover those games. But we'll see. We'll see. Only time will tell. I don't know why I went on a sports business diatribe, but nonetheless, Jaden Daniels cruising for a bruising is what old people would say. If you're a young kid, he playing like RG3. Go look up what happened to RG3. His final real year as a starter in the NFL. This looks eerily reminiscent to that. The biggest point of this game was Malik Neighbors' breakout game. And Emmanuel Forbes' redemption, by the way. Emmanuel Forbes Jr. has taken so much heat the last year and a half based off of how he's played. Because basically he's a rookie cornerback who is lined up against every team's best wide receiver in the NFL for a year and a half. And people are just like, you suck. And it's like, no, the guys he's lining up against are all pro. And in this game, Malik Neighbors destroyed, cooked whoever was lined up across him. It was not Emmanuel Forbes Jr. He got benched. So maybe we'll see him next week. Anyway, Malik Neighbors, rookie wide receiver, finally seeing that emergence. Absolutely massive, especially for Daniel Jones. Look, man, I hate being that guy talking about players robbing organizations because I really, at the end of the day, I think every player should get as much money as they possibly can out of the organization because look, I don't really want to go into the economics of how can you really say that you're a title contender unless you are fully maximizing every single resource that you have available, aka the salary cap, to get good players to play for you. Anyway, you should be every player should be trying to get as much money out of the team as possible because they're not giving you money back on the back end. And at some point, you're going to stop playing and the team's going to keep existing. And they're going to probably keep making money off your name if you were a good enough player. What I do have a problem with is money that I perceive that should have gone to someone else being in the pocket of someone else. They call that pocket watching. Yes, I'm a hater on that situation because it is the wackest story that happens so often in the NFL because it's like Saquon Barkley, clearly the heartbeat of the New York Giants offense. Plays one full season and it magically coincides with Daniel Jones' best year in the NFL. And now Malik Neighbors, hopefully not lining up to be the next victim of Daniel Jones, because I doubt he's getting an extension. But nonetheless, hopefully Malik Neighbors going to get a chance to go out here and ball out, and it'll be enough to attract, free agent wide receivers. I've also been waiting so long this season to see some of these rookies break out because I've been waiting to see Tyrone Purdy from Purdue. Really get Tyrone Tracy Jr. get a real chance to go out there and run the ball. Devin Singletary's been doing a really good job of running it, by the way. Not surprising. Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, I get the Bills got rid of both of those guys because they felt like they could do better and younger at that position. And James Cook is working out for them just fine, but to think that all three of those guys used to be in the same backfield together is insane. Because last year, I think all three of them rushed for over 1,000 yards. Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, and James Cook, all three of them did that. Anyway, moving on. Malik Neighbors' breakout game, some hope for Giants fans after they get rid of Daniel Jones, because they're going to get rid of Daniel Jones. Just so we're clear, this game was stupidly close mainly because, you guessed it, the Giants defense made that happen because that's what they do. They go out there and they play significantly better than their offense just to be let down by their offense. That happens. Naming names, which is a thing that I try to do for defensive players throughout the course of this show, just bringing up random names. Drew Phillips, Giants defensive back, balled the fuck out. He is a rookie out of Rutgers, I think. Drew Phillips, or is it Toledo? Toledo Rocket, and he was lit up. 12 tackles, 7 of them were solo, 2 tackles for loss. He got a QB hit, and he had a sack in this game. Dude was balling out of control. Out of control. Browns, Jaguars, oh my is the result because this falls in the oh my category because I am in a fantasy football league that is mostly Jaguars fans. And so when they are spiraling out of control, it's kind of funny to me. But I also learned a lot about the team as a whole in terms of like how fans perceive them. And they are, look, man, Jags fans are done with sunshine. I don't know, we've done this whole Doug Peterson thing before, right? Where like Carson Wentz looked like an MVP and then one year he didn't. That has not happened for Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence did look amazing. The probably the peak of this situation was when they played the Chargers playoff game and came back being down like 23-3 or something like that, or came back from being like 28-3 was the score at one point. And they came back. They had like 2 pick sixes from Asante Samuels Jr. and they charged it up. They charged that game up and the Jaguars ended up winning. Ever since then, it feels like there's been regression. The pass rush was there last season. We saw a lot of pressure being generated up front overall across the board. They found some secondary plays. Andre Sisco, the guy that Urban Meyer pretended that he knew who he was. That one time, one of the biggest identifying moments of Urban Meyer's tenure as the head coach of the Jaguars is when a reporter asked why Andre Sisco didn't play any reps, or asked Urban Meyer what he thought about Andre Sisco as a player and how he did today after the game. And he gave coach speak about like how he thought Sisco did really well. And Sisco played 0 reps in the game. So, yeah. Anyway, Browns, Jaguars. This one, we're seeing... Sorry. Is this the game with Buster Brown? There's a guy who plays for the Browns named Buster Brown, or plays for the Jags named Buster Brown. Anyway, I thought that was crazy. That one, because Buster Brown is a old black people thing that they say, not so fast, Buster Brown. And there's like a real dude named Buster Brown in the NFL, which is the reason that you probably haven't heard anything about it is because like, 2 Americas. The Browns in this one, final score 18-13. This one, 0-2 to start the season. Embarrassing comeback loss versus the Miami Dolphins, which a lot of people felt like they should have won. But if you've been paying attention to either one of those teams, the Dolphins were the bigger losers, even though they won the game, because they shouldn't have been in that situation to begin with. The Jaguars did not feel like they were the better team and have not felt like they were the better team out of the 2 of those Florida teams for quite some time. But the Browns getting this win after getting dismantled by the Dallas Cowboys the week before has got to be it's got to be a new low for the Jaguars, man. Like they had look, their offense was led by a lot of running plays out here. Again, the pass offense is like basically non-existent, like it's been basically since the back half of last season. There has not been much to count on in terms of getting the ball up and down the field. The Jaguars defense went out there and did their job. They generated a ton of pressure. There's so many times where they flushed out Deshaun Watson from the pocket. There's a lot of times where they tackled him for a loss or tackled him while he was running to try and get in open space. But Deshaun Watson has also figured out the solution to winning, or getting better with his offensive line, get away from them as soon as possible. So figuring out how to clear out the pocket to help himself stay alive longer. You know what I mean? And that, I feel like that was the X factor in this one. I wouldn't say that Deshaun played particularly well, but it was a close game throughout it, and the better of the 2 quarterbacks was hands down, without question, Deshaun Watson. He was able to get the ball up and down the field. There was a good chunk of time where the Browns defense just had the Jaguars locked up, like Akon style, and they wouldn't let them out. They had they generated a really cool looking interception, I will say that much, and then they magically gave up like one big offensive play. And that's the problem when you're talking about teams like the Browns and the Jaguars. They play games close because they have below average offense with top tier level defenses. And when one mistake happens, all of a sudden the game is completely shifted, and it takes the offense too long to generate any sort of offensive success to get back into it. And I feel like that's what happened in this one. So yeah, the Browns ran this one out. They were able to run the ball successfully the entirety of this game. Jerome Ford, who is technically the starter, but Deontay Foreman the last game got more carries than him. Jerome Ford had the most explosive play of the most explosive run play for the Browns offense, and more than likely is going to get more carries in week 3. We'll see. Definitely something to watch for because they are a run-based team. Do not get that confused. Despite having the most expensive quarterback in the history of the NFL, the Browns are once again a running team. So yeah, hope that works out for him. I really don't. I'm a big Baker guy now. Ravens, Raiders. This was heartbreaking. The NFL is a pretty treacherous place where you can outplay your opponent and still have your heart ripped out and you lose the game. This was almost one of those situations. The Ravens outplayed, without question, the Raiders in the first half of this game. The second half, the Raiders simplified things and looked like they were ready to put up 40 on the Ravens. We'll talk about what happened a little bit later on. One of the bigger things, heartbreak alert for me personally. Justin Tucker has taken 7 field goals this season. He's missed 2. It could be the unthinkable. We'll see. Only time will tell. First half of this game was dominated by the Ravens up front, despite the Raiders doing a really good job of eliminating Derrick Henry almost completely. I think he had like 3 carries for -6 yards almost as they were getting closer to halftime. The vast majority of the scoring in this game was from field goals. In particular, at half, the score was 9-6 for a reason. There was only field goals in the first half of this game. Then shit hits the fan. The Raiders come out, and Gardner Minshew, who got sacked 5 times in this game, by the way, showed off 2 skills. One, he ain't never scared. Never scared, never in his days has Gardner Minshew been scared. Number 2, he shows this real unique ability to get the ball to the fucking best player on the field. In the second half of this game, Davante Adams had 88 yards and a touchdown in just the second half. He had multiple plays where he caught for over 20. He had a 31. He had like a 30. I have it on a piece of paper. Hold on a second. I got it right here. Here it is. Checking the notes. In the second, this is just the second half. This is not including the first half. He had a catch for 26 yards, 30 yards, and 29 yards. That's just the second half. They literally were like, just keep throwing the ball to Davante Adams. And this is one thing I'll never understand. Sometimes I think players get caught up in terms of appeasing the coaches, that they forget that coaches want to win. And the number one way to win, or like one of the best paths to victory, is to throw the ball to the best player. And they threw the ball to Gardner Minshew, threw the ball to the best guy on the field. Davante Adams got open against, I think it was Brandon Williams, like so easily, so many times. He got Marlon Humphrey on an inside route because he's like twice Marlon Humphrey's size. By the way, check out Marlon's podcast. I can't necessarily say I agree with a lot of Marlon's thoughts, but they're always interesting. He seems like a guy, you know what? Never mind. I'm not going to say it. You make your own determinations. You come back and you tell me what you think of Marlon Humphrey as a person and as a podcaster. Anyway, the Raiders honestly cut down the destruction and they cut down the distraction stuff. So like there was less motion in the second half. There was also fewer tight formations. There's a lot of times, and this is what happened with the Titans a little bit later on. We'll talk about them as well. They ran a lot of tight formations in terms of like 4 wide receivers, and they were too tight on both sides of the line of scrimmage, which does help if you have guys that are going to run like out routes to try and get the safeties to drop down and the cover just outside of the splits, as opposed to like lining up spread out already and making it like a vertical game essentially. But in this case, the Ravens were pretty prepared for that. It felt like in the second half there was a lot more utilizing the full width of the field, which helped Davante Adams get open further down the field because there was more people trying to cover lateral space. But you know, what do I know? Just a guy on the internet. The Raiders scored on 4 straight drives in this game, and the Ravens found 0 ability to move the ball. Basically, The Ravens scored a touchdown. The Raiders scored a touchdown. And then for the next 3 possessions, the Ravens scored nothing. And then the Raiders of Las Vegas kept scoring until they were ahead. It was insane to watch because it felt like the magic just got sucked out of the. It looked eerily reminiscent to that playoff game last year versus the Chiefs. They just sucked the magic out of the team. So, and then for the defense to have that many issues with one player, obviously that one player is like potentially like the number 1 wide receiver in the NFL any given weekend and has proven himself to be a one-man army on many different occasions. It felt like it was one of those situations. So yeah, that's all I got for the oh my category. We got one more and then we're going to call it a night. Yeah. And it's not on here. I messed up. I didn't put the Titans-Jets game on here. That one was interesting to watch for sure. I feel like if you were a fan and you were watching that game, it would have been really fun for you. I felt like this is it would have gone in the this is what we're here for category if I remembered to type it into the system. Calvin Ridley caught a touchdown pass in between 2 defensive backs that literally made me yell out loud in this game, and that doesn't happen all that often. I enjoyed it. And I think if you're a random person who was just watching the game, you would enjoy it too because he was like 2 inches away from the ground, was able to squeeze in between 2 professional elite athletes and come up with a catch and then roll into the end zone for a touchdown. It made Will Levis look a lot better than he is as a quarterback in this situation. This game was truly defined by a lot of inconsistency, so vast majority of the Titans drives were longer period ones in terms of like more plays run, more time of possession, more yardage needed to be able to score in this one. So they actually, I'll say it, Will Levis outplayed Aaron Rodgers at the quarterback position throughout the course of this game. Aaron Rodgers, on the other hand, he was able to come out and hit like a bunch of home run plays. They had 30 total passes in this game, obviously, because when they have a chance to get the ball to Breece Hall, when they have a chance to get the ball to now Braylon Allen, who apparently is like the new kid on the block. And when I say new kid, it was really messed up that what led the highlight of that pass from Braylon Allen to Aaron Rodgers to Bo Allen for that touchdown, they were like, that's the youngest player in the league getting a touchdown pass from the oldest player. That's pretty messed up. I thought that was messed up, man. 30 passes in total from the Jets throughout the course of this game. Rodgers didn't complete back-to-back passes until there were 2 minutes left in the halftime. 2 minutes left until halftime, and he only had 7 passes that were over 10 yards. I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of like losing faith in the Jets wide receiver core like really fast. We saw Allen Lazard light it up randomly in spurts. Garrett Wilson struggled to get like any form of consistent success, and maybe it's because vast majority of the last 2 games, Aaron Rodgers has been under attack in terms of the pressure has been getting to him. What do you know? The Jets' offensive line that was a problem last year is also a problem this year. Who would have thought? Except everybody, right? Anyway, going back to the bigger thing at hand that I was talking about, Garrett Wilson's been struggling to get open, mainly because all the other guys are like kind of not threats. There's too many really big passing plays from the Jets that are successful because they go to running backs that are doing checkdowns. And obviously, that has a lot of benefits, but later on in the season, people are going to tighten up on that kind of stuff. But, you talk about Garrett Wilson. Mike Williams finally had a catch in this game. He had a catch for 19 yards. I think it was one catch. He was not targeted at all in week 1, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe with more time down the field, Aaron Rodgers would get more accustomed to throwing him the ball. But as of now, like if there's one position group for the Jets that is just like, wow, man, seem a little sus. And obviously some of that is definitely directly connected to Aaron Rodgers as a player. Throughout the course of this game, he was under pressure, and when he tried to throw the ball to like some of the surprise check, or he tried to throw the ball to the check down on the play, he was struggling to get the ball with enough distance to the receiver. He had a lot of times where he couldn't get the ball back to, or he struggled to get the ball back to the line of scrimmage. He was not leaving that pocket. He was not leaving that pocket, no matter what. It could have been 4 defensive linemen in that pocket. He was not leaving, and he looked really stiff. And I hate being that guy, but he's a 40-year-old guy recovering. He's a 40-year-old professional athlete recovering from an Achilles surgery, which is your Achilles is where you draw explosion from because it is a part of the spring in your foot where you used to generate power. So it's going to be hard, even though Aaron Rodgers has been the last 12 years been one of the more mobile quarterbacks in the NFL. That may be of the past, as people would say. Bad time to abandon running the ball, or bad time to abandon being a mobile quarterback when you have probably the worst offensive line you've had your entire career, maybe. But yeah, only time will tell. This game was real back and forth. Will Levis, like I said before, I felt like he outplayed Aaron Rodgers, especially in terms of getting the ball down the field. Other than that, Aaron Rodgers really struggled at the underneath stuff. He really struggled with plays that were off schedule and finding ways to get out of them. The Titans have to feel like they blew this game because they did have a drive that would have won it, or they had a drive in the first half where they got all the way down to the 8-yard line, and they had 4 positive plays in a row to get to that position, and then they fumbled the ball away. And it was recovered by the Jets. That felt like it took so much of the momentum out of their sails throughout the course of this game, because it felt like they were, it felt like they outplayed the Jets. But the Jets were able to keep it close, 1, because they have a really good defense, and then 2, because of the big plays down the field. Most of them were big run plays. But like I said, 7 passes from Aaron Rodgers went beyond 10 yards. Everything else is real underneath kind of short yardage stuff to kind of string in between the big runs that happened. So once again, another run-based team in the NFL. Congratulations to the New York Jets. I'm sure they're real excited about having Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback and being a run-based team. This is what we're here for. 2 more games and I'm done. I'll start with the game that is... These scores are deceptive for both of these. The most deceptive scoreline, hands down, without question, is that Buccaneers-Lions one. If you didn't watch it, you need to go back and watch it. You need to find a way to go back and watch Buccaneers-Lions. This game was so fun. I'll just read off all the crazy stuff that happened. Aiden Hutchinson had 3 sacks in the first quarter of this game because the Buccaneers had their backup right tackle in, which is bad for Baker Mayfield, obviously. An NFL officiating crew did not call a blatant pass interference. At one point, there was a deep in route run by Jameson Williams, and he was literally shoved, 2 arms shoved by a defensive back from the Buccaneers. It threw off his timing. Jared Goff threw to where Jameson was going to be, and then it was intercepted by the Buccaneers. It was blatantly right in front of the refs, and they did not call it. Never seen anything like it too often. Haven't seen anything like it since that one time. That one time with the Rams and the Saints. We don't talk about that anymore. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery had a bunch of amazing runs. Rashid, oh, by the way, don't worry. All this really cool stuff happened. There was a crazy snag by Mike Evans, as there always is every single time. Chris Godwin had a massive game as a wide receiver, but don't you worry yourself. The Buccaneers still cannot run the football. They were terrible on the ground. So, yeah, even with their fully healthy offensive line, it still didn't work out for them. But for the most part, this game went back and forth because there were so many turnovers. Most of those turnovers were really cool plays. Oh, Jared Goff's old self made a little bit of a reappearance. He threw a pass off of his back foot into... It wouldn't be double coverage. There was somebody running a crossing route. He threw it behind them off of his back heel, so it floated too high. So it went over to the initial defender that was defending the receiver, and then it went to the safety that was directly behind him, and he just jumped and caught it. It was like a rookie safety for the Buccaneers' first catch, or first interception. And yeah, it was very reminiscent of old Jared Goff from when he was with the Rams, which I thought we left that guy in the past, but I guess not. Anyway, this game was fun, beginning to end. Felt like it was really back and forth, and it was really more astounding that the Lions were hanging with the Buccaneers because vast majority of the good plays were from the Buccaneers' offense. By the way, Baker Mayfield has to be somewhere in the conversation for MVP after 2 weeks of the NFL season, which obviously that's when we hand out the MVP award, right? But yeah, Buccaneers Lions felt like they hung around in this one. Another heartbreaker loss for them that could have been avoided if they'd just been able to hold on to the ball a little bit more successfully. They are still looking good. They're 0-2 on the season, but they still look good. It does not help that the Rams got demolished by the Cardinals. But you can't do the transitive property for teams based on... You have to judge the way teams play. You can't do transitive property. By the way, Jameson Williams looks like a basketball player more so than a football player, and I find that interesting when I watch him play. Maybe it's because his pads are so small and his body type. Who knows? Last game. This one was the most fun for me personally to watch. It was the Vikings 49ers. This was some of the best defensive play I saw all weekend. There was one guy, I got to make sure I say his name right because I messed it up pretty much every time I thought of how to do this rant in my head. There was Josh Metellus, who had nearly 2 interceptions in this game. He had to settle for 1. He caught one off a deflection, and there was another one. He dropped it after he made like a perfect read on an out route from Brock Purdy. This game had pretty much everything, right? Mason Foster killing it still at the running back position. He had 100 yards rushing. Deebo Samuel went Deebo on him, bowed up on him. He was the best wide receiver in this game, and one of the wide receivers in this game, Justin Jefferson, had a 96-yard touchdown catch. He was the best wide receiver in this game, without question. And Brock Purdy, I guess we'll talk about the whole story. We'll talk about it throughout the course of the season. But the whole story is Brian Flores, who is the former head coach of the Miami Dolphins that most recently you probably heard of because of the horrible things that he used to say to Tua Tagovailoa as his coach, as his head coach or whatever, in that pretty bad situation with the Dolphins. Bad for everybody except like Stephen Ross. Well, even for Stephen Ross because he was losing and trying to lose games. Brian Flores found himself, he went from like the Steelers to the Vikings, and he's the Vikings defensive coordinator last year and this year. He invented a new defense. Really what he is disguising a bunch of different defenses in absolutely insane ways. And there's clips going around on TikTok. You can type in like Minnesota Vikings defense. But Brian Flores essentially has invented a new defense that is inspired by what he says is from Pat Narduzzi, who is the head coach of the Pittsburgh Panthers, where it's the school that what's that guy everybody loved so much last year? Kenny Pickett went to, and where Aaron Donald more famously went to, most importantly. But Brian Flores was inspired by Pat Narduzzi and invented a new defense last season, and that's why the Vikings were able to go out there and be so successful on the defensive side of the ball with Cameron Bynum basically playing wherever he wanted to on the field, which is kind of wild. But Josh Metellus might be that new guy. He was on the team last year, and he looked amazing in this game versus the 49ers. And I will say this, their defense is confuddled and really, really befuddled a lot of quarterbacks last season. But to see Brock Purdy make mistakes in this one, because he threw 2 interceptions, I believe, and to see him fight his way back to make the 49ers competitive in this game is the kind of stuff you as a 49ers fan, despite losing this game, have to feel pretty good about, right? Like if Brock Purdy's not the guy, you do not get the second half of this game. They start this game off pretty rough, and you don't get some of the drives that you saw in this game if Brock Purdy is not the dude. He may not be like a superstar, but clearly he is getting better, whether it be from confidence or having more tools in his bag or being able to express more of his skill in this game. There were some insane zones that the Vikings are throwing at him, and he was able to be patient enough to try and find an opening and knowing when to eject out of the pocket and go do his thing. He got a ton of help from his defense. Fred Warner got an interception and forced a fumble throughout the course of this game, so that's 2 possessions away from the Vikings. By the way, Sam Darnold back from the dead somehow. We talked about it earlier with Andy Dalton, the benefits of being a vet. There's a lot of times where there's just certain plays that because you've been in the NFL for so long and certain defenses, they can't fool you, right? Because you've seen it 1,000,001 times. You've seen preparation for this 1,000,001 times. You've seen how other players attack it. And the time that you spend sitting gives you a wisdom that is unavailable to starters, unavailable to people who eventually who are starters, because they don't have the time to sit back and watch all these minute details because they're worried about playing the actual game, right? And Sam Darnold clearly is benefiting from that. Plus, I think it's time we start giving Kevin O'Connell a lot of credit where it's due. He clearly is the guy, head coach wise. He lost his starting quarterback last season, and he had the Vikings competitive, right? This year, he's got Sam Darnold, and that's not saying that like Sam Darnold sucks or anything like that, but for the most part, like the last time all of us saw Sam Darnold, he was struggling with the checks notes. The Carolina Panthers, who would have thought? And the San Francisco 49ers, obviously big revenge game for him to go out here and be able to get this win, but I couldn't care less about the offense. The offense was really good in terms of like the players. Debo sent Brock Purdy, like I said before, it was really good to see him make connections with Debo. A lot of good passes to Juwan Jennings, who I'm expecting to have a big game this weekend because Debo is out for a little bit. But that plus knowing that he doesn't have Christian McCaffrey in their run game is setting up the pass and then being able to make sure that the pass can succeed. Brock Purdy is clearly taking another step forward. It felt like in this game, despite losing it, he took another step forward. Sam Darnold, once again, you look at all the best plays that he's made so far in this early on in this season. You know what his best plays are? Get the ball to the best motherfucker on the field. Get that ball to Justin Jefferson. No matter how far down that field he is, we're going to find out how to get it to him. That's how you get a 96-yard touchdown pass while you're literally taking the snap from inside your own end zone. Anyway, that game, you need to go watch it. Fantastic. Beginning to end. Amazing defensive plays. Really good offensive plays. And really tough to watch the teams go out there and try and score. That is week 2 of the NFL season. If you got any questions or anything like that, hit me up on social media. Hit me up on Instagram at the Ashton Forever. You can see it on the ticker below me. Hit me up on Twitter at FB_playbook. I actually need to get access back to my regular Twitter account. Anyway, if you are a big challenge fan or you watch the challenge, I also am a big fan of that. So hit me up on the internet about that. I love talking about the challenge. It's my 5th favorite sport. So other than that, I'm out. It's really late. I got to go do something really stupid for the next couple of hours and then get some sleep and then go to work. All right. I'll check you guys later. Oh, by the way, be nice, do good, and go home, Roger.